For months, the world watched Washington and Beijing drift further apart. Trade wars, sanctions, and sharp rhetoric turning the Pacific into a fault line. But suddenly, the temperature has dropped. Tariffs are easing, military hotlines are reopening, and U.S. President Donald Trump says his amazing chemistry with Xi Jinping is ushering in a new era of peace and prosperity. Behind the smiles, though, lies a colder reality. A G20 understanding could redraw the map of Asian influence, leaving allies and emerging powers scrambling to find their footing. For India, a nation that built its rise on strategic autonomy and a delicate balance between East and West, this could pose a real challenge. So today we argue, is the world witnessing the return of a U.S. China duopoly, and will India be left out in the cold? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. After years of tariffs, tech bans and tense words, something unexpected is happening. Washington and Beijing are warming up. Military hotlines are reopening, trade concessions are back on the table, and the tone sounds rather friendly. The US calls it communication restored. China calls it steady forward motion. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's talk of de-escalation with China sounds reassuring in Washington, but rings hollow in New Delhi. Chinese troops remain dug in across friction points along the line of actual control with India. For India, this supposed thaw between Washington and Beijing doesn't signal calm, it signals caution. Because while the US speaks of dialogue, China still hasn't disengaged. The signals came fast and straight from the top. President Trump called his summit with Xi amazing, claiming the relationship has never been better. He even said Xi personally assured him China wouldn't touch Taiwan while he's in office. For a rivalry built on tariffs and threats, that's a dramatic reset. On the sidelines of the APEC Security Summit, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth met Chinese Defense Minister Admiral Dong Jun. Days after he posted online, "We agreed to open military-to-military communication channels. The relationship has never been better." It was the kind of statement few expected to see this decade. America's top defense chief praising Beijing in public.
But, here is the new dynamic between Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump, where Trump is publicly, asked for the revival of a G2, that's a group of two, that's China and the United States, a concept that no US president has embraced, in the past. It's been suggested almost 2 decades ago, but no US president has really embraced it as much as Trump seems to have done as of now. But, if you look at the big picture, Geeta, the G2 statements that Trump has been making, and indeed, of course, all of this military-to-military talks between the US and China suggest more of a temporary thaw, a temporary kind of a ceasefire between China and the United States, rather than any long-term arrangement to, divide the world into two spheres of influence, or China and the United States coming together to solve the problems of the world, as was originally conceived by the G2 in the early 2010s.
The optics were unmistakable. Tariffs softened, rare earth exports resumed, promises to curb fentanyl chemicals were sealed. Washington offered partial rollbacks in exchange. The outcome? A transactional G2 reset. Less about alliances, more about accommodation. But this isn't a tidy piece. Trump's second-term diplomacy is driven by business first, strategy second. The fine print matters: who wins market access, who gains tariff cuts, and what quiet understandings are made behind closed doors. And then there's Taiwan. Trump said it did not figure in the talks, yet later claimed Xi promised restraint. Asked whether the US would defend Taiwan if attacked, Trump smirked. You'll find out if it happens. That ambiguity keeps everyone guessing. The 1979 Taiwan Relations Act allows support but doesn't guarantee US military intervention. A private handshake between presidents can't replace formal commitments. But it does signal something new. That stability now rests on personal understanding, not treaty obligation, and more so after President Trump took office. Across Asia, allies are watching with mixed emotions, some relieved, many uneasy. For India, the unease cuts deep. The Indo-Pacific order had been built on partnerships and coalitions, not on two superpowers managing each other. Now, the balance seems to be slipping back toward a quiet duopoly. Tensions in India-US relations haven't helped. Tariff hikes, higher H-1B visa fees, and Trump's claims of mediating between India and Pakistan have all added to that friction. Meanwhile, U.S. China ties are thawing fast. Trump's high-stakes meeting with Xi in South Korea sealed it. Tariffs on fentanyl-linked goods were halved, and overall duties on Chinese imports dropped to around 47%, giving Beijing better access to the U.S. market than India enjoys today. For New Delhi, the strategic equation is shifting. The Quad, defense partnerships, intelligence sharing all were built on the assumption of Washington's competition with Beijing. In 2017, the policy was containment. By 2025, it is accommodation. Delhi now has to rewrite a decade of assumptions. At sea, another front is heating up. The South China Sea has seen some of its most dangerous encounters in years. Chinese Coast Guard ships have rammed and blasted Philippines vessels with water cannons. Manila responded with joint drills alongside the US. Not just symbolism, but muscle. Washington has hinted at a show of force to reassure its treaty ally in Manila. But such power plays don't stop at the South China Sea. Their ripples reach the Indian Ocean. But India is still important. If tensions flare east of the Malacca Strait, Washington will expect India to keep the western Indo-Pacific steady while American forces engage farther east. But here's the blunt truth. China isn't moved by India's restraint. Beijing doesn't see New Delhi as a deterrent, but Beijing is intimidated by US power projection. When Chinese jets buzz around Taiwan and American carriers sail in, those same jets turn back. That's the real equation. Beijing bends only when Washington shows muscle. Temporary or permanent, the equation between Washington and Beijing could change geopolitical dimensions across the world. But what happens if a South China Sea crisis spills over? Washington will look to New Delhi to hold the line, to patrol and stabilize its half of the Indo-Pacific, track Chinese survey ships, expose covert mapping missions, and call out grey zone operations disguised as trade. But does Mr. Trump truly understand the importance of India here?
I think it's too soon to come to that conclusion, but definitely indications are that the Trump administration may be wanting to stabilize the relations with China at India's interest. India has to be very cautious of it, but that notwithstanding, only recently, just about a week back, we signed a 10-year defense modernization treaty with America. America's interest in Indo-Pacific is as important as India's and the rest of the world. They also want to make sure that global commons are free from navigation point of view as well for air transition.
Meanwhile, China's maritime footprint keeps growing. Its trade with Africa and the Gulf surges through alternative financial and shipping routes designed to evade US oversight. The ocean is getting more crowded, more opaque. For India, that means higher costs and sharper vigilance. Even as India's Navy works harder, the G2 tour deepens another risk: diplomatic marginalization. If Washington and Beijing are cutting quiet deals directly, New Delhi could be left reacting, not shaping. Not being on the larger map of Trump's Asia vision is and should be a serious concern for New Delhi, yet the room to maneuver remains. India's playbook for 2025-27 can be clear and pragmatic. Maintain strong military interoperability through the Quad and joint maritime awareness programs. Cement defense manufacturing partnerships. Keep trade with China flowing but strictly regulated, and build domestic muscle. Secure AI labs, advanced naval ISR systems, and robust semiconductor assembly. These aren't slogans, they're survival tools. By tightening controls on Chinese imports but keeping supply chains functional, India protects its economy. By boosting semiconductor assembly, known as ATMP, it prevents dependence from turning into vulnerability. And then there's the diplomatic lane, the global south. Countries across Africa, ASEAN, the Gulf, and Latin America want balance, not blocks. India can lead that voice, offering an alternative to U.S. China polarization. But leadership demands muscle. The Indian Navy and Coast Guard must improve how they detect and classify Chinese vessels masquerading as civilian. That means stronger ISR, faster lift capacity, and real-time coordination with trusted partners. On the technology front, the challenge is sovereignty. As the US tightens AI export rules and China builds its own tech ecosystem, India must secure its data, build local AI training facilities, and guard supply chains. In tomorrow's world, digital independence will equal national independence. Diplomatically, the G2 glow also brings discomfort. America's allies worry Trump's eagerness to stabilize ties could mean trading away old promises. Japan, South Korea, and ASEAN leaders hear his reassurances, but also remember the course of commerce that comes with them. For India, emotion and strategy must coexist. Modi government continues its neither nor stance, no blind alignment, no isolation. Engage Washington where interests align, cooperate cautiously with Beijing where geography demands, and expand links with Europe and Asia to keep options open. That balance will be tested. If conflict flares east of Malacca, does India join the show of force or hold its line as stabilizer? The answer lies not in words but in readiness. India's next move must be guided by capability, not impulse. As the G2 dynamic unfolds, military hotlines are back. Pete Hegseth's outreach to Beijing lowers the risk of miscalculation but doesn't erase rivalry. Communication may prevent war, it won't prevent competition. And Taiwan remains the powder keg. Xi's alleged assurance to Trump that China will do nothing while he's president might buy temporary peace, but not permanent calm. India's takeaway? Never rely on someone else's promise. Build your own strength. Shape your own outcomes. The global balance is being rewritten. If the US and China can stabilize their relationship around trade and security management, others must adjust fast. Some nations will gain leverage, others will lose it. India must make sure it's the former. Meanwhile, the maritime burden is real. Chinese dual-use ships continue probing India's neighborhood. Recognizing the difference between a trawler and a mapping vessel isn't optional anymore. It's strategic necessity. That means better surveillance, more coordination, and more pressure on Beijing's covert ocean tactics. And as global supply chains realign with lower tariffs and resumed rare earth flows, India must seize the moment. Domestic semiconductor production and tech resilience aren't luxuries. They're insurance policies against geopolitical shocks. Patience will matter too. India should keep pushing for transparent trade rules, open sea lanes, and multipolar cooperation. The global south is watching, and many are ready to follow Delhi's middle path. In truth, the G2's return is neither disaster nor deliverance. It's a reset, one that tests the Indo-Pacific's entire security architecture. The US and China are chasing their interests. India's mission is to make sure its own aren't trampled in the process. So where does that leave India? In 2025, the picture is contradictory. Warmer smiles between Washington and Beijing and heavier expectations on India. The tariffs may ease, phone lines may buzz again, but the seas will stay rough.
Global focus, I personally feel it's not the global focus that has shifted, but definitely Trump's or American focus that has shifted elsewhere under the present dispensation. That notwithstanding, India is well aware of the fact that Quad seems to have got diluted under Trump 2.0. Under Trump 1.0, Quad stood strengthened by an order of magnitude. Under Trump 2.0, there is no talk of Quad at all. That notwithstanding, India is improving and increasing its defense preparedness and defense relationship with Vietnam, with Indonesia, with Japan, with South Korea and Australia. We are also improving and strengthening our defense relationship with France, with Britain, as well as Canada. In other words, India is very cautious of the fact and very clear of the fact that Americans can ditch us at any point of time, and we have to have alternatives in place.
For India, the way forward is pragmatic resilience, close the interoperability gaps with partners, build domestic tech and defense muscle, keep trade with China but secure it, and above all, lead where others hesitate, in the global south, in the Indo-Pacific, in shaping the next world order. Because a duopoly in conversation doesn't mean a duopoly in command. While they talk, others can act. The G2 may be back, but so is the race to stay relevant. The Busan handshake may make headlines, but history will remember what follows, whether India lets that handshake shrink its influence or uses it to assert independence and vision. The table has changed. Delhi now must decide, sit quietly or build a bigger one. Thank you for watching Statecraft.